In this video, I'm going to tell you 3 things that you need to avoid when you're filming sports videos. Hey, what's going on? My name is Sarellas. I'm a videographer and editor from Toronto, Canada. I specialize in sports videography. And in today's video, we're going over 3 things that you should look to not do when you're filming your sports videos. The first thing is you need to make sure that you're not filming from the same spot the whole game. It's really, really important that you get different angles of an action, of an event, of any game that you're filming while you're on site. If you film from the same angle the whole game, for example, you're at a basketball game and you just sit on the baseline the whole time, that edit is going to look really stale really quickly because people are just going to be seeing the same thing over and over again. They'll watch it on Instagram for maybe 10, 15 seconds and they'll just feel like they've seen everything, so they'll move on. If you get a whole bunch of different angles, then you can show different actions from different vantage points and it'll give the audience a new perspective on every single thing you're showing them. It'll keep them more engaged. It'll make all your shots look more dynamic when you put them all together as a whole in a finished product that you're going to upload to social media or give to a client. It's going to cause people to watch your edits for longer and increase the retention time on your videos, which is what you want, I'm assuming, if you're making videos that you're going to show to other people. So when I'm filming a game, I try to, at the very minimum, always film from the baseline for each team, from each team's sideline, from the corner of the court if I'm filming a basketball game, or this applies to sports beyond basketball as well. You can just apply this to like soccer, football, etc. But I try to film from the corner as well. I also try to film from a few steps back. So maybe I go to the baseline, take 4 steps back, try to film from there, give me a different angle. And then I try to film from the stands. So if I'm in an arena, I'll go to the top of the 100 level. If I can get higher, like into a box or something that's way up there, I definitely will. And if you're in like a small arena or like a college stadium that's not that big, then just go to the top of the bleachers, film from up there, and get your high angle. But I try to, at minimum, get those angles when I'm filming a game, and try to do them all both standing and sitting so I can get a different vantage point from each of them. Moving around like this gives me a lot of dynamic shots that I can work with. It helps my edits stand out on social media when I put them out, and I guarantee that if you move around your venue and get a lot of different angles instead of staying at one spot the whole time, then your edits are going to start to stand out a little bit more as well. The next mistake that you definitely should not do when you're filming a sports game is do not keep your camera on auto. And honestly, this goes beyond sports games. I recommend that you just don't use your camera on auto at all. The camera is never going to know exactly how you want to expose your image. It's not necessarily going to expose the right part of your image, and it doesn't know how you want to go about setting the exposure to your image. So I definitely think that you should be using manual mode all the time, no matter what you're shooting. Say in a sports environment, for example, you want to get a really shallow depth of field on a certain shot because you have a player close to you and you think it would look like a cool close-up. Let's say you want to get, for example, a shot that's similar to those gimbal shots that they're using on all these sports broadcasts now, where you have the one player in the foreground and a wide-angle lens with a mirrorless camera on a Ronin, and the background is really blurry and the player is moving like really fast and frantically. Well, to get that shot, you need to have an open aperture, which means a low f-stop, and you need to have a really fast shutter and you're exposing using ISO. If you put your camera on full auto, your camera might not expose using ISO. Your camera might expose by lowering your shutter speed, or it might just not open your aperture up enough. And then you're not going to get the effect you're looking for. But if you're shooting on manual, then you can say, okay, I want my image to look like this. I want that blurry background. I want that jittery look in the player. So I'm going to crank my shutter speed. I'm going to open my aperture way up. And then if I need to get any more light into my image, I'm going to compensate using the ISO. And you can make that decision because you're on manual. And then you can be happier with the image that you get because you chose to make it look that way. If you're just shooting on auto, you're not going to be making those choices and you might not always be happy with your image. Additionally, I don't recommend using auto white balance. I used auto white balance when I was like a beginner and it created weird inconsistencies in my look for my images because I'd point the camera in one direction and it'd be more orange, and then I'd point it in the next direction and the lighting would be slightly different, or like there'd be some light coming through a window that would make the white balance change and it'd be a little bit more blue. And then when I cut those 2 images together, even though I was in the same place, they would look different and it would be really jarring because I'd be cutting from like an orange shot to a blue shot, and I didn't really know how to fix that properly back then. And even if you do go through and fix it, it's still more work that you don't necessarily have to do. So I would recommend when you go to a venue, just pick a white balance that's like neutral. If you're shooting in a stadium that has like fluorescent lights or something, and there's a lot of white light shooting onto the stadium, then I recommend just picking like 4,000 Kelvin and rolling with that, And then if you have to make tweaks in one direction or the other, you're still able to, but at least that change is consistent and easy to apply to all your footage. You don't need to manually adjust every single clip based on whatever white balance the camera chose was going to be correct for that specific shot. The only auto thing, I suppose, that I will vouch for is autofocus, because I understand that it can be really, really hard to manual focus all the time on sports that are moving so quickly, and sometimes you're just going to miss shots if you try to manual focus. Plus, autofocus technology nowadays is so good that if you have the right camera and lens combination, you're barely ever gonna miss a shot. I use autofocus all the time with my Sony a7 III paired with either the Tamron 28-75 that you're watching me film on right now, or the Sony 70-200mm f4, which is like my go-to sports videography lens for basketball. And this usually works out great. I set the autofocus zone mode to wide, and the autofocus mode is continuous, and this just works for me. So I've had no problems with autofocus, and I think you're fine if you use autofocus, but auto white balance, auto settings, any of that stuff, I'd highly recommend against it. Just do it manually. You're gonna be a lot happier with your images. The third mistake that I definitely think you should avoid if you are filming a sports game is don't film super long clips of your game. Instead, I definitely recommend that you should be filming a single action, and when the action is done, you cut and you start a new clip. This is mainly for post-production reasons that I recommend this. If you're trying to do in-game edits, for example, and you have a specific shot you want to export to social, it is much easier to grab one file, drag it onto your timeline, and then just export it without having to cut it or anything, than it is to drag a 5-minute long file, scrub through that, try to remember where the play you wanted to edit was, and then finally find that play, mark it, set the in and out points, drag the color grade over it, and export it. It's just a lengthier process, and you don't always have time like that if you're in a game and you gotta get an edit out quickly. Even after the game, if you want to find actions quickly and you want to make sure that stuff is organized so you can use the clips from that game down the line, then you can go through and actually label shorter individual clips by saying like, okay, player X had a layup and player Y got an assist in this clip, by changing the file name. And then when you want to go and use that like a year down the line, you can search for player X layup, player Y assist, and you'll find that clip. You'll click on it and it'll just be the action that you need. But the whole labeling process becomes a lot harder when you have super, super long clips, because there's like 5, 10, 15 actions in a single clip. And if you were gonna like write that in a file name, it would just be ridiculous and confusing. And then even if you do find the file where the action that you want to use is, then actually scrubbing through that file is gonna take time. And it might not seem like a lot of time, maybe a couple minutes to scrub through that file and find the action that you want. But if you always film long clips and you have to waste a couple minutes finding an action every time you open a file on a consistent basis, that's gonna add a lot of time to your edit and just make you a less efficient editor. So for that reason, I highly recommend that you film short clips and not long ones. And I understand that sometimes like it's not possible to film short clips all the time. If you're filming certain sports, if you have to film for a certain objective, you can't always cut your clips short. But if you can, I highly recommend that you do. That was 3 mistakes that you should avoid when you are filming sports videos. If you like this video, then please subscribe to my channel, because I post videography and video editing tips and tutorial videos similar to this on a regular basis, and I'd love to have you around for that. And if there are any other mistakes that you know of that people should avoid when they're filming sports videos, then drop those in the comments, because I'm sure it helps someone out, and I would love to hear what you guys got to offer, whatever tips you have. Anyways, that is going to be all for this video. So until next time, peace.